Good morning and welcome everyone out here to Donnybrook on such a great day. I want to start off today by actually thanking our hosts for this morning. They've been very gracious in giving up their time and their accounts for us to all gather here today. This is a great community here in Donnybrook and one that is suffering the challenges of a growing community. And yesterday we announced a major upgrade of Donnybrook Road out the front here, which has been the #1 issue right across this part of McEwen, and it's a really important announcement for the people who live here to have some progress going forward on one of their biggest challenges. Obviously I'm Jason McClintock, I'm the Liberal candidate here for McEwen, and I want to welcome Peter once again out to McEwen and hand over to you.
Well, Jason, thank you very much. Firstly, say thank you to forward to Priya and to Aidan and to Rocky as well for having us here today in their beautiful home, and as Jason said, they're very gracious in hosting us. Their story is similar to the story of millions of Australian families. They're just under the pump. It's their electricity bill, it's their water bill, it's their gas bill. Their mortgage has gone up 12 times under this government, and the Prime Minister has no solution for them. The Prime Minister is going into this election promising Australians that gas will be higher under Labor, that electricity will be higher under Labor, and if Labor keeps spending money the way that they have this term, then you'll end up in a Labor Greens minority government where interest rates will go higher because inflation will be driven higher. And that's just the reality of the situation. Now, we've got a positive plan for our country. We want to make sure that we can manage the economy more effectively than Labor, and coalition governments always do that. We have a plan to bring down the price of gas and electricity, in fact, costs across society. We've got a plan to bring down the cost of petrol by 25 cents a litre, or about $14 a tank. And for a family where you're commuting or where you've got teenage kids and you're fueling 2 or 3 or 4 cars a week, which is the reality for families in suburban areas, this will make a real difference. Our gas reservation plan is a plan for putting Australians first and for having gas into the system because it's involved in the production of electricity. It is involved in the production of steel and bricks, and right across the economy we have the ability to provide a lot of support to Australians in that regard. Obviously here in Victoria, people now have seen a really bad Labor government in action for a number of years. You've seen how Labor has mismanaged and really wrecked the Victorian economy, and you're seeing the first signs of that at a federal level as well. And 3 more years of Mr Albanese at a federal level, governing like Jacinta Allen does at a state level, would be a disaster for Victoria, but a disaster for our country as well. Yesterday we announced what is the missing infrastructure piece here in Victoria. That was an exciting day, and it was an exciting day because people know that that investment needs to be made. It is not going to happen under Mr Albanese and Jacinta Allen. The Allen-Albanese pact on the suburban rail loop is a disaster for Victoria. It's going to suck $200 billion, $200 billion, which is going to be sucked out of the economy into that project, which is never ultimately going to be delivered. And for the next quarter of a century, what Mr Albanese and Jacinta Allen are proposing, I think will just provide further pressure to taxes and to for businesses and others, just further imposts, further taxes, further levies, and it's just not going to be sustainable. So we've made a decision that we're better off to spend on a project which is properly costed, and Melbourne Rail Link is the missing piece of infrastructure for Victoria, and it can be achieved. We will achieve it, and I'm very pleased that we were able to make that announcement yesterday, and I think it's a game changer here in Victoria. So I'm happy to take it.
Anthony Albanese today indicated that Labor would seek a above inflation pay rise in its submission to the Fair Work Commission. If you're elected on May 3, what will your submission to the Fair Work Commission seek in terms of wages?
Well, we support wage increases, of course we do, and look, families have gone backwards under this government. There have been 7 consecutive quarters where families have been in recession. That's been the legacy of the Albanese government. So Mr Albanese can talk about putting up wages. Real wages have gone down under this government. That's the reality, and people know it. I mean, the Prime Minister out there telling Australians that they've never had it better off, that everything's good, that we've turned the corner. That's not the experience of families we're speaking to. Families are struggling under this government, and many people are just being crippled by the burden of bad economic management by a Labor government, racking up debt, $1.2 trillion worth. So We want to see wages go higher, but the other side of a family budget is costs. And the fact is that families are paying 30% more for groceries. Interest rates have gone up 12 times under this government. So that's the difficulty and that's the reality. I just don't think Mr Albanese understands how hard it is for families, and we need to manage our economy well, and that's exactly what we'll do.
Do you believe that putting wages up above inflation would fuel a wage price spiral and therefore make the Reserve Bank hesitant to cut rates?
Well, obviously the Fair Work Commission makes the decision independently. It's no different to the way in which the Reserve Bank runs their forecasts and their projections. And as we saw with the Reserve Bank, Australians have had 12 interest rate increases and 1 rate cut, and that's it. I think families were waiting for another 25 points, or another 0.25%, another 0.5%. It's not coming. It's not coming under this government. And the fact is that if inflation goes up, which it will under a Labor Greens government, because they'll spend like crazy, they'll tax like crazy, and what happens then is that these families with big mortgages end up having to pay more in their interest rates, and I don't want that for our country. I want to have better days ahead for families and for businesses, and we can do that. We can achieve that, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Mr. Dutton, if you were to make a submission, what kind of figure would you like the minimum wage to be?
Well, again, I mean, it's we're without economic advice from Treasury and from Finance, but our position is that we want higher wages, and we want to make sure that we've got downward pressure on costs, because under this government, real wages have gone backwards. And that's just the reality of people's lives. And if the Prime Minister's out there standing alongside Jacinta Allen saying that, you know, everything's good, it's all rosy, and that somehow you should be thanking Anthony Albanese for what's happening in your family budget at the moment, the guy's so far out of touch. And I just don't think he understands the pressure that families are under. That's the reality.
You said this morning that there's thousands of extra public servants in the Education and Health Department who are looking to reprioritise funds. But the Education Department only has about 1,700 employees, and a large chunk of them do compliance work in childcare and early education. So what exactly would you be looking to reprioritise or cut in that workforce?
Well, at a time when families are paying 30% more for groceries, people are working second, third jobs, when their electricity bills have gone up by 32% and their gas bills gone up by 34%, they are struggling to find every dollar in their budget. We've just spoken with a beautiful family here. Both parents are working. Families across the country are putting off having kids under this government because they can't afford to save for a house deposit, they can't afford to pay their rent, and people are really struggling. And I think in that environment where Australians are working harder for every dollar, they want to make sure that every dollar in tax they're paying is spent wisely. And our argument is that to grow the public service 3 times the rate that the Rudd-Gillard government did is not sustainable. So we will look across government in Canberra to identify where the additional places are and to make sure that we can get support back to frontline services. And there are ways in which we can support families by putting more money into frontline services, which is exactly what.
Mr. Dutton, Mr. Dutton, can I follow up on that?
Just firstly, in terms of the broader capital plan, are you also looking at efficiencies in the Business Affairs Department, and would you consider overhauling and closing the gap targets that are in place now, or do you commit to keep them?
Well, again, I've been consistent in what I've said in relation to this. I want to make sure that we can find the most efficient way of dealing with the problems that our country faces. The Prime Minister has seen massive price increases across the economy, and families are experiencing that. And families are under pressure in their own budgets, and they expect the government, the federal government, to spend money wisely. And so that's the approach that we've taken. We're not. I mean, the government talks about waste, but they don't do anything about it. So we need to make sure that we've got the most efficient spend of taxpayers' money.
Can I follow up?
Mr. Dutton, but just going to an election,
Sure.
don't people deserve to know what you're looking for when you're going line by line in the budget to reprioritise? Like, what do you think to make up, where do you want the funds to go?
Well, the government has created an environment, an economy, where they are increasing the public service by 41,000 people. That's 3 times the rate of what the Rudd-Gillard government did, and they're not doing it because they're trying to find efficiencies. They're doing it because that pleases the unions. Now, increasing the bureaucracy in Canberra is not a way to deliver efficient services to families here in the
But
suburbs.
aside from that, we're talking, you said you're going to go line by line, the health and the education. Like, give us a sense of what you're looking for in line by line.
Well, if we're finding a bloating of the public service, which is what's happening in Canberra, that is not helping families in Donnybrook. And I want to build the road here and the infrastructure here to help families deal with their life. And the reality is, I just finished this point, and I think it's important for us to live within our means as a government. And if there is waste and there is bloating of the democracy, of the bureaucracy, then we need to make sure that we're getting money into more GPs. We've made a big announcement in relation to mental health. We've got a $5 billion plan to build 500,000 more homes. And as the Howard government did when they came in '96, they had to clean up a Labor mess. That's the reality of it. And that is always the task of a Liberal government. So I want to make sure that we can help families. The Prime Minister has made economic decisions in now 3 or 4 budgets where it has hurt families, and that's the reality. Now, if the Prime Minister doesn't get that and doesn't understand that families are under real pressure and that we need to make sure that we're spending their taxpayers' dollars efficiently, then he's more out of touch than I think.
Mr. Dutton,
Can I fill in this up, please? Last night on 7:30, Bridget McKenzie said that you wouldn't name before the election the 41,000 positions you want to cut. In February, you said, of course, with your quote, of course you would release the cost on that before the election. Can I clarify, will you say before the election or will it be after the election which positions you would cut? And we've been talking here today about people doing it tough. Is it fair that out of the public service of 200,000 people, you're not going to say which 41,000 of them might not have a job in 6 weeks?
I just think you want to get back